a work of historical fiction inspired by real American experiences. Names, characters, and events are creative. I was 18 years old, and everything I owned fit in a single black trash bag on the passenger seat of a 2009 Toyota Corolla that wasn't even mine. The social worker had given me $342 in cash, folded twice inside a white envelope with my name written on it in blue ballpoint pen. She had given me a goodbye casserole from my last foster mother, wrapped in foil, still warm on my lap. She had given me a sealed letter from a lawyer in a town I had never heard of. And she had given me the keys to the Corolla because the previous foster family had been willing to sign it over rather than pay to tow it. And then she had given me her hand. A small, professional handshake, right there on the cracked sidewalk outside the state office, on the morning of my 18th birthday. "Good luck, Ren," she had said. "You've done so well." And she had gone back inside, and the door had closed behind her, and I had stood there in my second-hand coat, staring at the gray April sky over Nashville, understanding for the very first time in my life what it meant to be a person that no one was obligated to come looking for. I sat in the Corolla for a long time before I started the engine. The casserole was still warm. The envelope was in my pocket. The trash bag held 2 pairs of jeans, 4 t-shirts, a hairbrush, a pair of sneakers that were a half size too small, and a small wooden box that had belonged to my mother. In the box was her wedding ring, which had never been pawned even in the hardest years, and a photograph of me at age 3, sitting on her lap, laughing at something outside the frame. That was what I owned on the morning I became a legal adult. $342, a borrowed car, a casserole, and a life that had never really belonged to me. I drove to the Walmart on Charlotte Pike because the social worker had told me that I could legally park there overnight, and I sat in the lot until the sun went down and the parking lot lights came on, and I ate half of the casserole with a plastic fork, and I thought about the fact that I had nowhere to be the next day, or the day after, or the day after that. I had been in 11 foster homes in 12 years. I had learned to sleep in cars before, but I had never slept in one that belonged to me. Around 9 o'clock that night, I opened the envelope. The letter was printed on heavy cream-colored paper, and the letterhead was embossed at the top in brown ink. Pennington and Associates, Attorneys at Law, Cedar Hollow, Tennessee. I had never been to Cedar Hollow. I had never heard of Cedar Hollow. I was not even sure I had ever driven through that part of the state. But the letter was addressed to me, Miss Wren Whitmore. I read it 3 times before the words started to make sense. "Dear Miss Whitmore, it is my solemn duty to inform you that you are the sole beneficiary of the estate of Mr. Silas Abernathy, your maternal grandfather, who passed away on August 17th of last year at the age of 72. Per the terms of his final will and testament, you are hereby the inheritor of 1 parcel of land, approximately 1/2 acre in size, situated at Lot 7, Ridge Road, Cedar Hollow, Tennessee, together with all structures thereon, in exchange for the symbolic sum of $5, which has been paid in advance on your behalf. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience to arrange the transfer of keys and documents." I stopped reading, I put the letter down on the passenger seat on top of the trash bag, and I stared at it. Silas Abernathy, my maternal grandfather. I had a grandfather. I had had a grandfather for 18 years, and no one had ever told me. My mother had died when I was 6 years old. I remembered her in flashes, the smell of her hair, the way she hummed when she cooked, the feeling of her hand on my forehead when I had a fever. My father had left us before I could even form a memory of his face. Mama had once told me he had gone home to Louisiana, and that was all she ever said about it. But she had never, not once in all my small years with her, mentioned a father of her own, never said your grandfather in any sentence, never showed me a picture, never sent a Christmas card, never explained anything. I had assumed, the way a child assumes, that she had come from nowhere, that we were alone in the world together, and when she went, I was alone by myself. But there had been a man, in Tennessee, who had died 8 months ago, and who had left me a cottage for $5. I turned the letter over, and there, paper-clipped to the back, was a Polaroid photograph. It was old, faded at the edges. The colors had gone the soft golden brown of time. In the photograph, a man in his 50s stood on the porch of a small gray cottage, holding a baby. The baby was wearing a pink sleeper. The man was looking down at the baby with an expression on his face that I did not have a word for, not then. Not sitting in that parking lot in Nashville at 18 years old. It was the expression of a man who had just been given the world. I flipped the photograph over. On the back, in careful pencil, someone had written, "Silas and Wren, April 2009, 2 years old." She laughed the whole time. I had no memory of this. None. Not the porch, not the man, not the day, nothing. But someone, somewhere, had held me when I was 2 years old and had looked at me like I was the world, and they had kept the picture. I sat in the Corolla in the Walmart parking lot, and I cried for a very long time, with the kind of crying that makes no sound, because I had learned long ago that foster homes do not reward loud children. I cried until the parking lot lights blurred into long yellow streaks on the windshield. I cried until the casserole went cold on my lap. I cried until there was nothing left in me but a hollow, tired ache and a single, impossible thought. Someone had waited for me. Someone, somewhere, for 18 years had been waiting. If you've ever walked into a moment and felt, for the very first time in your life, that somebody was expecting you, that somebody was waiting for you, then I want you to do something for me right now. Hit that subscribe button and tell me one word in the comments. Expected. Because I want to know I'm not telling the story alone. I want to know you're here with me, with Ren. Now, let me tell you what she did next. I drove out of Nashville the next morning at first light. The envelope from the lawyer had a phone number and an address. I did not call first. I was afraid maybe that if I called, the voice on the other end would say there had been a mistake, that the letter was meant for someone else, that the grandfather was not real, and the cottage was not real, and the Polaroid of the man with the baby in the pink sleeper was just a strange and cruel coincidence. I did not want to be told, over the phone, at a Walmart parking lot, that the only piece of family I had ever been handed was a clerical error, so I drove. Tennessee in April is a country of its own. You leave the city, and the land begins to speak in a different voice. The highway narrows to 2 lanes. The billboards thin out. You pass tobacco barns leaning into the earth like tired old men, and cattle standing in fields of new green grass, and small white churches with hand-painted signs. You pass a cemetery on a hillside, and you wonder which of those stones might belong to someone who had loved you, and never told you, and never had the chance. The drive was 4 hours east. The little Corolla rattled on the inclines, and the radio only picked up one station clearly, and it played old country music, songs my mother used to hum when I was small. Patsy Cline, Loretta Lynn, songs about women who had lost things and kept going and lost more things and kept going still. I stopped once for gas. I ate the other half of the casserole out of the foil, standing next to the pump, with the wind blowing my hair into my eyes. A man in a feed store cap watched me from inside the gas station. He did not stare. He watched the way older Southern men watch young women who looked tired, and then he gave a small nod through the glass, the way one stranger acknowledges another's quiet struggle. I got back in the car. I kept driving. Cedar Hollow appeared the way small towns in Tennessee always appear, which is to say all at once. And then you are through it, and if you blink, you have missed it entirely. A wooden sign at the edge of the road read, "Welcome to Cedar Hollow, population 3,200, settled 1847. Main Street was 1 block long. There was a diner with a faded yellow awning that said Millie's. There was a hardware store with a wooden porch called Tremblay's. There was a white clapboard church with a steeple so tall it seemed to have been measured against the sky itself. There was a post office and a feed store and a small brick building with a sign that said Pennington and Associates, attorneys at law, established 1952. I pulled into a parking space in front of the law office. I sat in the car with my hands on the wheel. I looked at myself in the rearview mirror, 18 years old. Dark hair pulled back, green eyes with too many shadows under them. A stranger's face, in a stranger's town. I got out of the car. I walked up the steps. The door had a small brass bell that rang when I opened it, and the air inside smelled of old paper and furniture polish and something faintly like pipe tobacco, although I would learn later that Mr. Pennington had not smoked in 30 years. The receptionist was a woman in her 60s with reading glasses on a silver chain. She looked up, and her face did something that I did not understand at the time. It softened, it changed, like she had been waiting for me too. "You must be Miss Whitmore," she said quietly. "Yes, ma'am." "Oh, honey." Her eyes filled up. She stood. "He's waiting for you. He's been waiting for you." She did not mean Mr. Pennington. She meant Silas. But Silas was 8 months dead, and I did not know yet that a man could wait for you from beyond his own ending. Mr. Harold Pennington was 70 years old, and he stood up from behind his desk when I walked in. And he crossed the room with both hands out to shake mine. He was a tall, thin man with white hair combed back neatly, and he wore a dark brown suit that had clearly been tailored a long time ago, when he had been 30 pounds heavier. His handshake was firm and warm and dry, the kind of handshake my mother would have said you could trust. "Miss Whitmore," he said. My goodness, my goodness. He held my hand a moment longer, then was strictly professional. Then he gestured to the leather chair across from his desk, and I sat down, and I realized only then that I had not eaten breakfast, and my hands were shaking. "I won't waste your time with formalities," he said, settling back into his own chair. "Your grandfather sat in that very chair you're sitting in, Miss Whitmore, every Tuesday afternoon for 3 years. He would come in and he would say to me, 'Harold, is there anything new? Is there any way at all?' And I would have to tell him, 'Silas, the records are sealed. The state won't release them. I'm sorry.' And he would nod, and he would thank me, and he would walk out. And the next Tuesday he would come back and ask again. I could not speak. 'He was a stubborn man,' Mr. Pennington said. 'He did not give up on you, not once, not for a single week in all those years. When he got sick, at the end, he called me to his hospital bed, and he made me promise. He said, "Harold, when I am gone, they will have to release her name because they will have to notify her of the estate. And when that happens, you find her, and you bring her home." "Home," I whispered. "Home," Mr. Pennington nodded. "That's what he called it, the cottage. He called it Wren's home, since before you were born." I put my hand over my mouth. My eyes burned. Mr. Pennington slid a small brown envelope across the desk. "The keys," he said gently. "And the deed. It's all yours now, paid in full, taxes current through next year. There's a little money in a local account, too. We can go over that when you're ready. But right now, I think what you need is to go see it." He paused. "And Miss Whitmore, one more thing. There is a woman in town named Eunice Hargrove. She was your grandfather's dearest friend for 40 years. She has been preparing the cottage for you. She didn't know when you'd come, or if you'd come. But every Sunday for 8 months, she has been up there, dusting, airing it out, putting fresh flowers on the table. She said she wanted it to be ready in case you came." I started crying again. I could not help it. I sat in the leather chair in the office of Pennington and Associates, established 1952, and I cried into my hands, and Mr. Pennington did not say anything at all. He just pushed a box of tissues across the desk, and he waited, the way he had waited for my grandfather, and the way my grandfather had waited for me. Ridge Road climbed out of Cedar Hollow through a stand of oak trees that were just beginning to put out new leaves. The gravel crunched under the Corolla's tires. I passed a rusted mailbox marked 3 and then 5, and then, half hidden in a tangle of wild honeysuckle, a mailbox marked 7. I stopped the car. I got out. The air in those hills smelled of damp earth and pine sap, and something sweeter, something like apple blossoms, although I could not see any apple trees. The silence was enormous. It was not the silence of a parking lot, which is only the absence of human noise. It was a living silence, full of birds and wind, and the small private sounds of a forest going about its business. A narrow path wound through the honeysuckle. I followed it. And then the trees opened up, and the path opened up, and I saw it. The cottage was small, smaller than I had imagined. Gray board and batten walls, weathered to the color of old silver. A tin roof, speckled with rust. A sagging porch with a single rocking chair. A chimney of river stone. A brick path leading to the front door, laid by hand, uneven, beautiful. And the door was painted blue, the brightest, most defiant sky blue I had ever seen. The paint was peeling a little at the edges, but someone had touched it up recently. Someone had cared. Someone had wanted me to see a blue door when I came home. I walked up the path. My feet knew the way somehow, though I had never walked it before. I stepped onto the porch, and the boards did not creak because someone had reinforced them. Someone had gotten down on their old knees and driven new nails into the old wood, just in case. Someday, a girl with a trash bag might come walking up the path. I put the key into the lock. It turned easily. The door swung open, and I stepped inside. The cottage was one room. That was all. One single room, with a stone fireplace on the left wall, a small iron bed in the far corner, under a quilt the color of autumn leaves, a wooden table with 2 chairs in the middle of the room, and a tiny kitchen along the right wall, with an old enamel sink and a hand pump and a wood-burning cook stove. But here is what stopped me in the doorway. The room was clean. Not dusty, not abandoned, not forgotten. The floor had been swept. The window, the one single window over the sink, had been washed until the April sunlight poured through it onto the table in a warm yellow rectangle. There was a glass jar on the table filled with fresh wildflowers, violets and dog-tooth daisies, and one single pink redbud branch, still in bloom. There was a folded quilt on the bed and a pillow in a clean white case. There was a loaf of bread wrapped in a blue and white checkered cloth on the counter, and a jar of honey beside it, and a small crock of butter. And on the table, weighted down by a smooth river stone, was a handwritten note. I picked it up. The handwriting was old and careful and looping, the kind of handwriting that gets taught to girls in one-room schoolhouses. "Welcome home, honey. I knew you'd come one day. Your grandpa always said so. When you're ready, come find me at the diner. I'll be in the corner booth, the one by the window. I'll wait as long as you need. With love, Miss Eunice Hargrove." I sat down on one of the wooden chairs. I put the note on my lap. I looked around the room. Someone had been expecting me, not just Silas, not just Mr. Pennington. A whole town, a whole community of strangers who had known somehow that a girl named Wren was out there, and that one day she might come. I had walked into 11 different homes in 12 years, carrying a trash bag and a wooden box, and in not one of those 11 homes had anyone put flowers on the table for me. I put my head down on the table next to the wildflowers, and I stayed there a long time, and the April sun moved across the floor, and I thought, so this is what it feels like. So this is what it feels like to come home. I did not go to the diner that first day. I could not. I was not ready to meet the woman who had put the flowers on my table, because I was not ready to explain why an 18-year-old girl with a trash bag and a borrowed car was crying in a cottage she had never seen. So instead, I slept. I slept for 14 hours in a bed that someone had made for me with a quilt that smelled of cedar and lavender, and I did not wake once until the sound of a songbird outside the window pulled me up into a morning I did not recognize. The light was soft and gold. The fire had burned down to embers in the stone fireplace. Miss Eunice had laid and lit it for me, I realized later, against the chill of the April night. Someone had even left kindling stacked beside the hearth. I lay in that bed, and I listened to the bird, and I thought about the word songbird, my songbird. That was what the first letter would say, the one I had not yet found. That was what Silas had called my mother, and then me, though I did not know it yet. I would find out soon, and when I did, my heart would break and break again, and then slowly, painfully, beautifully begin to mend. But that morning, I knew none of that. I only knew that a bird was singing outside my window, and that I was warm, and that for the first time in my life, I had woken up in a bed that nobody could take away from me. I got up. I washed my face at the hand pump. The water was so cold it made my teeth ache. I ate a piece of Miss Eunice's bread with honey, and it was the best thing I had ever tasted, and I cried while I was eating it, which I would later learn was a thing that happened often in Cedar Hollow. People cried while they ate, because the food was made by hands that meant it. And then I drove into town. Millie's Diner had red vinyl booths and a long counter with cake domes under fluorescent light, and the air smelled of coffee and bacon and fried potatoes. When I walked in, a little bell rang over the door, and every single head in the place turned to look at me, not in an unkind way, in a curious way, the way a small town looks at a face it does not know. And then from the corner booth, the one by the window, a woman stood up. She was in her late 60s, small and sturdy, with soft gray hair pinned back in a bun, and cheeks that had been reddened by a lifetime of Tennessee winters. She wore a blue cardigan over a flowered dress and a gold cross around her neck, and when she saw me, her hand flew up to her mouth and her eyes filled instantly with tears. "Oh, child," she said, loud enough for the whole diner to hear. "Oh, sweet child, you came." And she walked straight across the diner and put her arms around me. I had not been hugged, not really hugged, in 12 years. Foster families are kind, many of them, but they do not hug. They cannot afford to. Attachment is a luxury in a system designed to move children from one house to another. So, I had forgotten what it felt like, the small, sudden surrender of a body that knows it is safe. Miss Eunice Hargrove held me for a long time, right there in the middle of Millie's Diner, in front of a dozen strangers drinking their morning coffee, and none of them looked away, and none of them laughed, and none of them hurried us along. They just watched, and some of them wiped their eyes, and one old man at the counter said, very quietly, "Well, she came after all. Silas was right." When Miss Eunice finally let me go, she held me at arm's length and looked at my face for a long time. "You have his eyes," she said softly, "green as river glass. You have his mouth, too, and his mama's hair. Lord have mercy. You are your family, child. You are every bit of them." A young woman in a waitress apron appeared at my elbow. She was about my age, maybe a little older, with dark curly hair and an easy open smile. "Miss Eunice," she said, "why don't I bring you all some coffee and some biscuits? On the house. Earl said so." Miss Eunice nodded. She took my hand and led me to the booth, and I sat down across from her, and the young woman, who I would come to know as Della Marchetti, 20 years old, the granddaughter of the diner's cook, and who would become the first real friend of my adult life, brought us a pot of coffee and a plate of biscuits the size of my fist, and a little white dish of butter and jam in a mason jar. Miss Eunice wrapped both her hands around her coffee cup and looked at me. "How much has Harold told you?" she asked. "Just that my grandfather left me the cottage, and that he tried to find me for a long time. Did he tell you why he couldn't?" "No." She nodded slowly. She took a breath. "Your mama, Ellie," she said. "She was 17 years old when she left Cedar Hollow. She and your grandpa, they had a terrible fight. About a boy. About her plans. about all the things 17-year-old girls fight with their daddies about. She walked out of that cottage in the middle of the night and got on a Greyhound bus, and she never came back. Silas looked for her for 2 years. He hired people. He called hospitals. Nothing. She didn't want to be found. My hands were cold on the coffee cup. She sent him one letter, Miss Eunice went on, when you were born. One letter with a picture of you and a return address in Memphis. He drove there the very next day, but she had already moved. She didn't leave a forwarding address. He stayed in Memphis for a month, honey, knocking on doors, asking at churches, asking at the post office. Nothing. But the Polaroid, I said. The one in the envelope. I'm 2 years old in it. She smiled, and there was so much tenderness in it that I could barely look at her. Oh, that, she said. That was the one time. The one single time. Your mama called him out of the blue when you were 2. She said she was passing through on her way somewhere, and would he want to meet you, just for a day? He said yes before she finished asking. She brought you to the cottage, she stayed 3 hours, and then she took you away again, and he never saw either of you again. I closed my eyes. He kept that picture on his dresser until the day he died, Miss Eunice said, and every single night, before he went to bed, he picked it up and he kissed your little forehead through the glass. Every night, for 16 years. I put my face in my hands and I cried. And Miss Eunice reached across the table and put her old warm hand on my wrist. And she did not try to stop me, because she understood that some tears are not meant to be stopped. They are meant to be witnessed. That afternoon, after the diner, I met the rest of Cedar Hollow. Earl Tremblay came out from behind the counter of the hardware store to shake my hand. He was 75, with a face like weathered leather and pale blue eyes that had seen a great deal, and he held my hand in both of his and said, "Your grandpa reshingled this very roof for me back in 1986. Didn't charge me a dime. Said a man's roof shouldn't cost him his pride. You need anything in this store, any tool, any nail, any paint, you come see me. Family discount. And before you argue, little lady, you are family. Your grandpa made sure of that." I did not argue. I met the postmistress, a woman named Ruth, who had held on to Silas's letters for 12 years every time they came back undeliverable, because she did not have the heart to throw them away. I met the preacher at the Methodist church, a gentleman in his 50s who told me that Silas had sat in the third pew on the left every Sunday for 40 years, and that he had been missed terribly these last 8 months. And I met Tanner Brennan. He was at the cottage when I drove back that evening. His pickup truck was parked at the end of the gravel path, and he himself was up on the roof, hammering something into place with long, steady strokes. I got out of the Corolla. I stared up at him. He stopped hammering. He squinted down at me. He was maybe 32, broad-shouldered, dark-haired, with the kind of still, watchful quiet that I would later learn came from 4 tours in Afghanistan and the slow, ongoing work of coming home from them. "Miss Whitmore," he called down. "Yes." "Tanner Brennan, Miss Eunice asked me to shore up your roof before the May rains hit. Hope that's all right. I'll be out of your hair in an hour. I can't pay you." He looked down at me for a long moment. His face did not change, but something in his eyes softened, the way the eyes of a man who has seen the worst of the world soften when they see someone he has decided to protect. "Miss Whitmore," he said quietly, "I'm not here to be paid. I'm here because your grandpa built the playhouse my little sister had when she was 7 years old, and he did not charge my daddy 1 red cent for it because my daddy had just lost his job at the mill. I owe your family a roof, that's all." He went back to hammering. I stood in the yard for a long time, watching him, and I thought, this is a town of debts, a town of favors, a town of quiet, stubborn people who do not forget. And my grandfather had built it around me, one kindness at a time, for 40 years, against the day when I might finally come home and need a place to land. If you've ever walked into a room full of strangers and realized somehow that they already loved you before they had even met you, because they had loved someone who loved you, please do me a favor right now. Hit subscribe and leave me one word in the comments. Stay. Because that's the word Ren needed to hear. And maybe it's the word you need to hear too, tonight, wherever you are, whatever parking lot you're sitting in. Stay. Stay. You are expected. You are waited for. Now let me tell you what Ren found under the floorboards. It was 3 days before I found the first hiding place. I had spent those 3 days doing what Miss Eunice told me to do, which was mostly resting and eating. She brought me a pot of beef stew the first night and a pan of cornbread the second. And on the third morning, she came by with a basket of eggs from her own hens and a jar of strawberry preserves. And she sat with me on the porch and taught me the names of the birds. "That one," she said, pointing to a tiny bird with a red breast, "is a redstart. They nest in the dogwood over yonder every spring. Your grandpa used to whistle to them. They'd whistle back. He said it was a conversation. I always thought he was making it up, But one spring I sat right here in this chair, and I heard it, and I'll be a monkey's uncle if that bird didn't answer him, clear as day." She paused. "Your grandpa heard music and things, honey. Even when the world was being cruel to him, he heard music. He said you had that in you too. Said he knew it the minute he held you at 2 years old. Said you laughed at the wind chimes on his porch for an entire hour. He remembered that? Honey, he never forgot a thing about you. Not one single thing." On the third evening, alone in the cottage after Miss Eunice had gone home, I started cleaning in earnest. I swept the floor with a broom I found leaning in the corner. I wiped down the shelves. I washed the single window again, even though Miss Eunice had already washed it, because I wanted to touch everything in the house, to know every corner of it, to make it mine the way other people made themselves theirs. And that is when I noticed the floorboard near the hearth. It was slightly raised, just a fraction of an inch, but enough that the broom caught on it. I knelt down. I touched it. It was loose. My heart began to beat faster. I got the tip of a butter knife from the kitchen drawer, and I worked it under the edge of the board, and the board came up as easily as if it had been waiting 80-some years to be lifted. Underneath was a dark, shallow space, and in the dark, shallow space was a tin box. Army green, with a latch on the front, old and dented and scratched, and engraved roughly on the lid, in the uneven letters of a man carving with a pocket knife, was the word Songbird. I lifted the box out. My hands shook. I sat back against the cold stone hearth with the box in my lap, and I listened to my own heart for a minute before I opened the latch. Inside was a stack of letters, a thick, thick stack bound with twine. The envelopes were different sizes and different shades of white and cream and manila, and every single one of them had my name on the front, Miss Wren Whitmore, and a different foster home address, and every single one of them had a red rubber stamp across the front that read, "Return to sender, no forwarding address." I counted them later. There were 87. On top of the stack was one final letter, not sealed in an envelope, but folded, with my name on the outside in the same handwriting. This one had never been mailed. This one had been left for me to find. I unfolded it. My songbird, it began, and I had to put it down. I had to breathe. I had to put my hand on my chest and remind myself that I was a person, and I was here, and I was allowed to read this. Then I picked it up again, my songbird. If you are reading this letter, then Harold has kept his promise, and you have come home. I am so sorry I could not come for you myself. The state told me I was too old, too poor, too alone. They said you needed what they called a real family. I tried to tell them that I was your real family. I tried to tell them that I had built you a home with my own 2 hands 37 years before you were born, though I did not know then what I was building or why. I tried to tell them that love is a real thing, maybe the only real thing, and that it is not measured in bedrooms or bank accounts. They would not listen. So, I built instead. Season after season for 12 years, I built another piece of what I could not give you in person. I wrote you these letters whenever the longing got too heavy to carry alone. Sometimes once a month, sometimes twice. Sometimes only when the leaves turned and I remembered your mama used to love the fall. I mailed them, and they came back, and I put them in this box because I could not bear to throw them away. I wanted you to know someday that you were thought of, that you were remembered, that you were loved. Songbird, the cottage is yours now. It is not much, but it is every penny I had, and every hour of my last 30 years. When you are ready, look to the heart of the house, the stone that does not belong. There is more I need to tell you, and I did not want to put it all in one place because secrets are best kept in small pieces, and I needed yours to be safe. Whatever you find, whatever you choose, know this. You were loved from the first moment I saw you. You have been loved every single day since. You will be loved, I promise you, for as long as the stars hang in the sky over Cedar Hollow. Welcome home, my songbird. Your Grandpa Silas. I read it again, and a fourth time. Then I untied the twine on the stack of envelopes, and I opened the first one, dated October of 2013, 4 months after my mother had died, and I read the first letter my grandfather had ever written to a granddaughter he could not reach. Dear Wren, you are 6 years old today. I do not know where you are. I have called every agency in Tennessee. They will not tell me. I have written to the governor. He will not answer. So, I am writing to you. I want you to know, on this, your first birthday without your mama, that you have a grandpa, and he loves you, and he is thinking of you, and if the wind ever blows through a window that happens to be yours, and you feel a warm thing on your cheek, know that it is me, blowing you a kiss across Tennessee. Happy birthday, Songbird. I read every single letter. It took me until 3 in the morning. I read about his garden, and his dogs, and the birds he fed in winter, and the sermons he disagreed with, and the recipes Miss Eunice brought him, and the Christmas trees he cut down every December from the back of his land just in case I ever came. I read about every year of my life, told from a porch in Cedar Hollow, Tennessee, by a man who had never stopped looking for me, not for a single week, not for a single day. And when I finished, the moon was setting outside the window, and the first birds of dawn were starting to call to each other in the trees. And I was not the same person anymore. I was a person who had been loved. I did not open the stone that night. I was too tired, too emptied out, too full. I slept until noon, and when I woke, I made coffee on the little stove and drank it on the porch. And I thought about the heart of the house and the stone that did not belong, and I understood even before I looked that he meant the fireplace. The fireplace was the first thing you saw when you walked in. It was made of river stones, smooth and gray, mortared together with the careful hand of a young man building in 1972, when the dogwoods along Ridge Road were just saplings, and the world was a different country. I knelt in front of it. I ran my hands over the stones. Most of them were round, weathered by the creek that ran at the bottom of the hollow, but one stone, low on the right side, was square, squared off with sharp corners. Cut, not found. It did not belong. I went into town and bought a small crowbar and a chisel at Tremblay's. Earl did not ask me what I wanted them for. He only smiled at me over the counter and took my $3 and said, "You come back if you need anything else, little lady." When I got back to the cottage, Tanner was there. He was finishing up the porch steps, sanding a rough place I had not even noticed. He looked at the crowbar in my hand and at my face, and he set down his sandpaper. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "would you like some help?" I looked at him. I looked at the crowbar. I looked at the cottage. "Yes," I said. "I would." Tanner and I sat together on the hearth for nearly 2 hours, chipping away at the mortar around that one square stone. He did not ask me what I thought we would find. He did not ask why my grandfather had hidden it there. He just worked beside me in patient, careful silence. And when the stone finally came loose, he stepped back and let me be the one to pull it out. Behind the stone was a second tin box. This one was heavier. I lifted it out with both hands. I set it on the floor between us. I opened it. The first thing I saw was the money. Neat bundles of $20 bills and $50 bills and some hundreds, held together with rubber bands that had gone brittle with age. I would count it later. $22,340. Under the money was a small velvet pouch. I lifted it out. It was heavy. I loosened the drawstring. 18 gold coins spilled out into my palm. American eagles, each one with its weight and its meaning. Tanner let out a long, quiet breath. "Ma'am," he said softly, "your grandfather was providing for you." "Yes," I said. My voice came out a whisper. "He was." And under the gold coins, wrapped in a piece of faded blue silk, was a small gold locket on a chain. I recognized it. I had seen it in the photograph of my mother that I kept in the wooden box. She had been wearing it in that picture, the one of me at 3 years old, sitting on her lap. It was my mother's necklace. I opened it. Inside, on one side, was a tiny photograph of my mother as a girl, maybe 16 years old, laughing at the camera. And on the other side was a tiny photograph of me at 2 years old. He had put us together, the two people he had loved and lost. He had put us in a locket and hidden it inside a stone, inside a wall, inside a cottage he had built with his own hands, so that someday, when I came home, he could give his two songbirds back to each other. I sat on the floor with the locket in my hand, and I wept. And Tanner Brennan, who had fought in Afghanistan, and who had known loss in ways I could not imagine, turned his face toward the wall and let me have my privacy, even though he was 3 feet away. And under the locket, there was one more letter. Songbird, the second letter began. By now you have met some of Cedar Hollow, and you have begun to understand. I need you to know one more thing, because it is a hard thing, and I wanted you to have it told to you by me, not by anyone else. Your mama did not die of cancer. I stopped reading. I had been told my mother died of cancer for 12 years. That is what the foster system had told me. That is what my paperwork said. That is what every social worker in my life had said. Cancer, breast cancer, specifically. They had given me a name for the thing that had taken my mother, and I had carried it with me like a small, heavy stone for 12 years. It was not true. I made myself keep reading. Your mama died in a car accident in January of 2013 on a country road outside of Memphis. The roads were icy. She was driving alone. She had left your daddy by then. He was not a bad man, Songbird, but he was a lost man, and he could not be what either of you needed. He had gone on home to his people in Louisiana, and your mama was trying to raise you by herself, and she was tired, and she was working too many hours, and the road that night was a road she should not have been on in weather like that. It was an accident. Nobody's fault. But she was gone, just like that, and you were 6 years old, and the state came and took you before I could even get on a plane. I fought for you in court for 6 years, Songbird. 6 years. I hired 3 different lawyers. I mortgaged this cottage twice. I drove to Nashville 41 times. The judge told me I was too old. The judge told me I did not have the income. The judge told me the state had already placed you with a good family, and that moving you would be disruptive. I tried to tell her that a grandpa is not a disruption. A grandpa is a homecoming. She did not listen. Finally, when you were 12, I ran out of money and I ran out of time, and my lawyer told me to stop, that I was doing you more harm than good, that every court appearance was something in a file the judges kept using against you. So I stopped fighting in the courts, and I started fighting in the only way I had left. I started building this home, and I started writing these letters, and I started putting away every dollar I could, so that when the day came, when the state had to let you go, because they have to let everyone go at 18, you would not walk into the world with nothing. The money in this box is not a lot in the way the world measures money, but it is every spare dollar of my last 20 years. It is your college if you want college. It is a down payment on a different life if you want a different life. It is yours. It was always yours. I only kept it warm for you. The gold is different. The gold is for if things get bad. If the world turns hard and you need something you can hold in your hand, the gold will be there. Do not spend it foolishly. Spend it when you need it. Your grandma, my wife, taught me that. She lived through the Depression. She said a woman should always have something heavy in her pocket. And the locket, Songbird. The locket is so you know. You are your mama's daughter. You are my granddaughter. You were not alone in the world, not even for one day. You were loved all along by people who could not reach you. And now, if you are reading this, you can reach us. One last thing. A man named Victor Ashford is going to come see you. Maybe he already has. He owns a company called Summit Ridge Resorts, and he has been trying to buy my land for 3 years. He wants to put a ski lodge up here in the hollow. He offered me money, and I said no. He threatened me with lawsuits, and I said no. He called my lawyer, and my lawyer said no. He will come to you, Songbird, and he will offer you a great deal of money, more than you have ever seen. You can sell it if you want to. I will not be angry. I am already gone, and I want you to have what you need, and I know money is what the world uses to measure safety. But before you decide, I want to tell you something. This cottage is not money. This cottage is not land. This cottage is the last 40 years of my life, shaped into wood and stone and poured into a blue door. If you sell it, you will be fine. But if you stay, Songbird, if you stay, you will be home. The choice is yours. It has always been yours. I love you. I loved you before I met you, and I loved you for 16 years after I saw you last. And I will love you for all the years that come, whether I am here to see them or not. Your grandpa, Silas Abernathy. Tanner had left quietly while I was reading. He had set the stone back against the opening of the hole so the wind would not come through, and he had gone out and closed the door softly behind him, and I was alone with the letter and the money and the gold and the locket and the truth. My mother had not died of cancer. She had died on an icy road outside Memphis because she was tired and she was alone and she was raising me on her own. And my grandfather, who I had never known I had fought for me in courts in Nashville for 6 years and lost every time because he was old and because he was poor and because the system did not measure love. I held the locket in my hand. I pressed it to my forehead. Mama, I said out loud for the first time in 12 years. Mama, he tried so hard. And somewhere outside the window, a bird sang back. In the morning, there was a knock on the door. I had slept on the floor in front of the fireplace because I could not bear to leave the open stone and the open letters and the open wound of the night. I woke to the knock and I sat up, and my neck ached and my eyes were swollen, and for a moment I did not know where I was. Then I remembered, and I got up, and I opened the door. A man stood on the porch in a suit that had never seen a day of actual work. He was in his 50s, silver-haired, tan, handsome in the particular way that wealthy men are handsome, which is to say that his teeth were too white, and his watch was too expensive, and his smile did not reach his eyes. "Miss Whitmore," he said. "Yes." "Victor Ashford, Summit Ridge Resorts. I was a business associate of your grandfather's. May I come in?" "No," I said. I said it before I knew I was going to say it, but I said it and I meant it, and something in his face tightened, just a little. "Very well," he said pleasantly. "I'll keep this brief. I understand you've inherited this property. I also understand that you are a young woman, alone in the world, with limited resources. I would like to offer you a great deal of money for this parcel of land, $850,000. I did not flinch. I had been expecting this. "Miss Whitmore." He smiled a practiced, sympathetic smile. "That is life-changing money, college, a home of your own, somewhere more suitable for a young lady, a fresh start. Your grandfather was a stubborn old man. Don't make his mistake. Don't let sentiment keep you poor. Mr. Ashford, I said, I'm not going to sell. His smile did not change, but something behind it did. A cold, small thing. A thing that was not sympathy and had never been sympathy. You don't have to decide today, he said. Take a week. Think about it. Talk to Mr. Pennington. He'll tell you it's a generous offer. And Miss Whitmore, I'd encourage you not to be hasty. This is a lot of land and a lot of liability for a young woman in your situation. Accidents happen, properties depreciate, situations change. He smiled again, tipped an imaginary hat, and walked back to his car. I watched him drive away. I closed the door. I slid the deadbolt. And I stood there for a long time, with my forehead pressed against the blue paint of the door, and I thought about my grandfather, who had been offered the same money and had said no, and who had been harassed by this man for 3 years in a hospital bed and an empty house. And I understood, suddenly and clearly, why he had hidden everything in pieces and stones. He had not trusted Victor Ashford not to come looking for it. And he had been right. That night, someone threw a rock through my kitchen window. I was reading by lamplight at the table when it happened. The rock came through the glass and landed on the floor at my feet. And I screamed, and I dropped the book, and for a long moment, I just sat there shaking. Because I had never had a rock thrown through a window of a house that was mine. Tanner Brennan's truck pulled into the gravel path 11 minutes later. I do not know how he got there so fast. Later, I would learn that he lived half a mile down Ridge Road, in a small house his father had left him, and that he had been awake, and that he had heard the sound. He came in with his jaw tight and a shotgun on his shoulder, and he looked at the rock and the broken glass and my face, and he did not say anything at all. He just cleaned up the glass. He boarded up the window with a square of plywood from his truck. He went outside with a flashlight and walked the perimeter of the cottage for 20 minutes. And then he sat down in the rocking chair on the porch with the shotgun across his knees, and he said, Miss Wren, I'm going to sleep out here tonight. That all right? I can't ask you to... You didn't ask. I offered. That all right? Yes, I whispered. Thank you. He nodded once. I went inside. I lay on the bed in the corner. I listened to the creak of the rocking chair through the blue door, and the soft rhythm of a man keeping watch, and for the first time in my entire life, I fell asleep knowing that someone was between me and the darkness. If you've ever been bullied, pressured, threatened, or told in 1,000 small ways that you don't belong somewhere, that a place, a job, a home, a life is too big for you, then hit subscribe right now. And leave me one word in the comments, stay. Because that's what Wren needed to hear. That's what I want you to hear. You belong where you stand. You do not have to let them chase you off. Now, let me tell you what came next. The next morning, I went to see Mr. Pennington. I told him about the rock. I told him about Ashford. I told him about the letters and the money and the gold and the locket. I told him I was not going to sell. He listened to all of it without interrupting, and when I was finished, he stood up and he walked to a file cabinet in the corner of his office, and he unlocked it with a small brass key. Wren, he said quietly, I was your grandfather's lawyer for 31 years. Before he died, he gave me this file. He told me if you ever came, and if you ever said the word stay, I was to give it to you. He set a thick manila folder on the desk in front of me. I opened it. Inside were notes in my grandfather's careful hand of every single contact he had ever had with Victor Ashford. Dates, phone numbers, letters, voicemail transcripts. 3 years of systematic harassment documented the way an old man with a steady hand documents things when he knows he is being tested. March 4th, 2022. VA called again. Offered $400,000. I declined. VA said, You'll regret this, old man. I said, I've regretted plenty. This won't be one of them. June 19th, 2022. VA sent a lawyer to my door. Lawyer threatened zoning challenges. I showed him the 1972 deed. He left. November 8th, 2022. VA called at 11 p.m., sounded drunk, said, You won't live forever. I hung up. January 30th, 2023. Filed a police report. The sheriff said there was nothing they could do without a physical threat. On, 3 years of it. And on the last page, a name I did not expect. August 3rd, 2024. Odessa Holloway came by. She told me VA had been in her house 3 days ago, offering her a finder's fee to report on my activities. She said she refused. She said she wanted me to know. I believed her, mostly. I looked up. Odessa Holloway, I said. She's my neighbor, the one up the road. Yes, Mr. Pennington said. She loved your grandfather, Wren, for a very long time. He never knew. She's helping Ashford. I don't know what she's doing now. Your grandfather trusted her once. Then, at the end, he wasn't sure. I sat with that for a minute. "There's something else?" Mr. Pennington said. "Your grandfather had investigators look into Mr. Ashford. He didn't share everything with me, but he shared enough. Summit Ridge Resorts has a pattern, Wren. They move into small towns. They make offers. When people refuse, they apply pressure, legal pressure, financial pressure. They bribe local officials to change zoning. They file nuisance lawsuits to drain people's savings. In the town of Piney Creek, over in North Carolina, an elderly couple sold their farm for 1/10 of its value because Summit Ridge sued them 4 times in 2 years. That's how they operate. That is what your grandfather was fighting. And that's what he left me to fight." "No, Wren." Mr. Pennington leaned forward. "He left you this file so you would not have to fight alone. He left you the deed and the money and the gold and these records and an entire town of people who loved him. He did not leave you to fight. He left you armed." Miss Eunice came to the cottage that afternoon with a casserole and a large cardboard box. She set the casserole on the stove. She set the box on the table. "Wren, honey," she said, "it is time for you to see these." She opened the box. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, were 12 smaller boxes. Each one was labeled in my grandfather's handwriting: Wren, age 6, Wren, age 7, Wren, age 8, all the way up to Wren, age 17. "What are these?" I whispered. "Christmas presents, child. He bought you one every year, wrapped them every year. He kept them in the closet, on the shelf above the coats, and every Christmas Eve he would take them down. And he would sit with them in the rocking chair, and he would hold each one for a while, and then he would put them back. I told him he was being morbid. He said he was being hopeful. He said one day, when you came home, you'd get all your Christmases at once." I could not speak. I sat down at the table, and I put my hands on the boxes, and I could not move. "You don't have to open them all today," Miss Eunice said gently. "Take your time." I opened the one labeled Wren, age 6. Inside was a stuffed rabbit, soft and brown, with a red ribbon around its neck. A note in his handwriting. "Your mama told me once you loved rabbits. I hope you still do." I opened age 10, a book. "Little House on the Prairie," a note. "I hope you are reading, songbird. I hope someone is reading to you." I opened age 14, a small, beautiful acoustic guitar, 1/2 size, a note. "I don't know if you like music, but your mama did, and her mama did, and the Abernathys have been singers for as long as anybody can remember. If you play this, I'll hear it somehow. I know I will." I opened age 17, a silver necklace with a small bird charm, a note. "You are almost a woman now. I have never in my life stopped thinking about you." I read every note. I held every gift. I cried so hard I could not see. And Miss Eunice sat across from me at the wooden table, and she did not try to fix me because she understood that I was not broken. I was just finally being given everything I had been owed for 12 years, all at once, and a heart can only hold so much at a single time before it spills over. When I was done, she reached across the table and took my hand. "Your grandfather loved you, Wren, every day of your life, every single day." "I know now," I whispered. "I know." The week after that was the hardest week, and then it was the week everything began to turn. Odessa Holloway came to the cottage on Thursday. She knocked on the door, and I almost did not open it, because Mr. Pennington's file was still fresh in my mind. But she looked so small standing on my porch, so gray, so tired, and something in her face was not the face of an enemy. So I opened the door. "Wren," she said, her voice was hoarse, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to let me say it, because if I stop, I won't be able to start again." I nodded. She came in. She sat at my table. She did not take off her coat. "I loved your grandfather," she said, "for 30 years. He never knew. I never told him. I was married once, and then I was widowed, and by then Silas was so deep in his grief over your mother that he could not have loved anyone back, and I knew it, and I never asked him to. I was his neighbor. I was his friend. I brought him soup when he was sick. That was all. That was enough." She took a breath. "When he died, Wren, I was so angry. I was angry at God, and I was angry at him for dying, and I was angry at myself for loving him all those years for nothing. And Victor Ashford came to my door 2 weeks after the funeral, and he offered me $400,000 for my land, and I took it. I took it out of spite. I took it because I was too tired and too sad to fight anymore. I sold him 30 acres that your grandpa and I had walked together for 30 years. Her hands were trembling. And then Ashford came back. He said he needed somebody in the hollow to keep an eye on things, to tell him when you arrived, to tell him what you were doing. He said he'd pay me. I said yes. I said yes, Wren, because I had already sold the land, and my soul felt sold already, and I did not see what one more piece of it mattered. She reached into her coat pocket. She pulled out a small digital recorder. "I've been recording him," she said. "Every phone call, every conversation, for 3 weeks. I could not do it anymore, Ren. I could not do it. Your grandpa would have been ashamed of me. I am ashamed of me. I want to make it right. I don't know if I can. But this is what I have." She set the recorder on the table. "It's everything. His threats, his schemes, his bribes to the county zoning office, his plan to sue you in 3 different jurisdictions to drain the inheritance. Everything. Take it. Do what you need to do with it. And tell me, Ren. Tell me to go. I'll go. I won't bother you again. I'll leave Cedar Hollow if you want me to." I looked at this old woman in her coat, with her tired gray face, and her trembling hands, and a recorder on my table that would change everything. And I thought about my grandfather, and what he would have done. And I said, "Odessa, take off your coat. Sit by the fire. I'm going to make you some tea." She broke. Right there at my table, she put her face in her hands, and she broke. And she wept for 30 years of unspoken love and 8 months of self-betrayal. And I put the kettle on. Sometimes the people we think are our enemies are just broken people who loved someone and did not know how to say it, and grief took them down a path they did not mean to walk. If you have ever forgiven someone you thought you never could, or if you are still trying to, tonight, right now, type "forgive" in the comments. Because I believe in it, I have to. And I think, maybe, so do you. The town meeting was held at the Methodist Church on the 2nd Sunday of May. It was Mr. Pennington's idea. He said that Cedar Hollow had always handled its own business, and that what Victor Ashford was doing was Cedar Hollow's business, and that a town meeting in a church was an old American custom that still had teeth when you used it right. The church was full. I had never seen it full. 300 people, shoulder to shoulder on the wooden pews, and more standing in the back. Every person I had met in 3 weeks, and many I had not. Earl Tremblay in the front row, his cap on his knee. Miss Eunice beside him. Della Marchetti with her grandfather, the diner cook. Tanner Brennan at the back, arms crossed, watching every door. Mr. Pennington at the lectern in his Sunday suit. And me. Mr. Pennington spoke first. He laid out what Victor Ashford had been doing. He read from my grandfather's notes. He played, through a portable speaker, 3 of Odessa's recordings. The room listened without a sound. When the part came where Ashford laughed on the phone and said, "The old man's already half in the grave. We just have to wait him out," a low murmur went through the pews, and I saw Earl Tremblay's hands tighten into fists on his knees. Then Mr. Pennington looked at me. "Miss Whitmore, would you like to speak?" I had not planned to. I had not written anything down. But I stood up, and I walked to the front of the church, and I turned around, and I looked at 300 faces, most of them belonging to people who had loved my grandfather more than they had ever known me. And I told them about the 87 letters. I told them about the 12 Christmas boxes. I told them about a man who had sat in Harold Pennington's chair for 3 years, every Tuesday, asking if there was any way at all. I told them about a man who had lost a daughter, and then lost a granddaughter, and had built a cottage with his own hands, and had kept the blue door painted for 40 years, against a homecoming he did not live to see. I told them that Victor Ashford had called my grandfather at 11 o'clock at night, drunk, and had said, "You won't live forever." And I told them that my grandfather had lived long enough to leave a record, long enough to leave a voice, long enough to give a granddaughter a town. I sat down. The church was silent. And then, one by one, the people of Cedar Hollow stood up. Earl Tremblay first. He was 75 years old, and his knees did not like the rising, but he rose. "I'll sign any affidavit needs signing. Silas Abernathy shingled my roof when I couldn't afford to feed my boys. I'll be damned if I sit in this pew while somebody like Victor Ashford tries to erase him." Miss Eunice second. "I'll testify in any court that'll have me. Silas was the finest man I ever knew. He deserves to be heard, even now." Della Marchetti's grandfather, whose name was Salvatore, stood and said, "Summit Ridge came to me 6 months ago, tried to buy the diner. They offered me more than it was worth. I said no. I didn't tell anybody why. I'm telling you now. Put me on the list." And then the preacher, and then the postmistress, and then a farmer I had never met, and then another, and then another. By the time they were done, 63 people had stood, and 63 people had said, "Put me on the list." 63 people in a town of 3,200 who had been approached, pressured, threatened, or offered money by Summit Ridge Resorts over the last 3 years, and who had not, until that night in that church, known they were not alone. Victor Ashford had made a mistake. He had threatened a town that remembered its own. The state attorney general's office took the file 3 weeks later. The criminal investigation took 9 months. By February of the following year, Victor Ashford had been indicted on 21 counts, including real estate fraud, bribery of public officials, conspiracy, and witness intimidation. Summit Ridge Resorts filed for bankruptcy. 3 other small towns across Tennessee came forward with similar stories. Ashford went to prison for 8 years. Odessa Holloway testified in court. She wept on the stand. She told the truth. The prosecutor, a kind young woman from Nashville, thanked her afterwards and shook her hand. And Odessa rode home to Cedar Hollow in the back seat of my Corolla, holding my hand the whole way because her hands were shaking too hard to hold anything else. She became, in time, one of the most beloved people in my life. The cottage is still here, 2 years later. The paint is still blue. I am 20 years old now. I am studying social work online through the community college because I want to help children in foster care. I want to be the person I did not have when I was 6. I want to sit in courtrooms and argue for a grandfather who wants his granddaughter back. I want to be loud in the places where my grandfather was not allowed to be loud. The cottage has a new roof, put on by Tanner Brennan, who has become the older brother I never had, and who sometimes still sleeps in the rocking chair on the porch when there is a storm. He started his own construction company last year. He hired Della's cousin as his first employee. He is teaching me how to use a hammer, and I am teaching him how to read poetry. And neither one of us is very good at our lesson, but we laugh a lot, which is a thing I did not know I could do. Miss Eunice comes every Sunday after church. She teaches me to cook the things my grandfather loved: chicken and dumplings, peach cobbler, the kind of biscuits Della's grandfather puts on the counter at Millie's. I have gained 8 pounds, which Miss Eunice says is good, because I was too thin when I came home. Della is in nursing school now. She will graduate next spring. The gold my grandfather left me paid for her first year, because I asked her what her dream was, and she cried and told me, and I said, not anymore. Not if I can help it. The gold was supposed to be heavy in my pocket. But I found out something my grandfather did not live to tell me, which is that the heaviest thing you can carry is a secret, and the lightest thing you can carry is a shared life. Earl Tremblay is 77 now, and still opens his hardware store every morning at 7. He calls me grandkid. I bring him coffee on Wednesdays. Mr. Pennington semi-retired last year. He still does my legal work. He will not let me pay him. I have stopped trying. Odessa lives in her little house up the road. She has planted a garden twice the size she used to have. She brings me tomatoes in July. We visit my grandfather's grave every Saturday afternoon together. We do not always talk. We do not have to. And I have been reading the letters, all 87 of them, slowly, one a week. I do not want to rush through them. I do not want to get to the end. As long as there is a letter I have not read, my grandfather is still talking to me. The last letter I read was the one he wrote on my 18th birthday, the April before he died. My songbird, if you made it to today, then you made it home. I built this cottage when I was 19 years old, in the summer of 1972, with my Uncle Wendell, who was a carpenter, and who taught me everything I know about building with my hands. I did not know at 19 what I was building, or why. Your mother was not born yet. Your grandmother was not even in my life yet. But I built it strong. I built it with good hands. Uncle Wendell asked me once, "What are you building this for, Silas?" And I said, "I don't know yet." And he laughed and he said, "Well then, build it like it matters." So I did, and 47 years later, I finally understood. Every nail I drove, every board I laid, every stone I set in that hearth, I was building it for you. You were already coming. I just did not know your name yet, but God knew, and the wood knew, and the cottage knew, and it waited, just like I waited, just like Cedar Hollow waited. Welcome home, my songbird. The cottage waited, Cedar Hollow waited, and so did I, for all the years the Lord gave me to wait. Love always, your grandpa. I sit on my porch in the evenings now, when the light turns gold over the Tennessee hills, and I drink coffee from a mug Miss Eunice gave me, and I listen to the birds in the dogwoods. Sometimes I whistle to them, sometimes they whistle back. My grandfather was right. It is a conversation. I think about the girl I was 2 years ago, in a Walmart parking lot in Nashville, with a trash bag and a casserole and $342 on the morning the state handed her back to herself. I think about how sure she was that nobody was coming. I want to reach back through time and put my hand on her shoulder and tell her that she is wrong, that somebody is coming, that somebody has always been coming, that her whole life, a man in a cottage on a hill in Cedar Hollow, Tennessee, has been building her a home, one nail at a time, and keeping the blue door painted fresh, and writing her letters he could not send, and buying her Christmas presents she would not open for 12 long years. But I cannot reach back. So instead, I live it forward. Instead, I keep the porch swept and the door painted and the garden growing. Instead, I open Millie's mail on Tuesday mornings with Della, and I read with Miss Eunice on Sunday evenings, and I meet Tanner for coffee on Saturdays. And I wait for the children in the foster care system, whose files I will one day read, and whose hands I will one day hold, and whose grandfathers I will one day find. Because I know now, the way my grandfather knew at 19 in a summer in 1972. You build it. You build it strong, and you build it like it matters. Even if you don't yet know the name of the person who will one day come walking up the path. If this story reached into your chest tonight, if you have ever felt alone, and then somehow, some way, discovered that you were loved all along by someone who could not reach you, or someone you did not know to love back, then please, please subscribe to this channel. We tell stories here for women who believe in second chances, in unlikely homecomings, in family found in the most unexpected places, and in love that does not end just because a life does. Tell me in the comments, was there ever someone who loved you, even when you did not know it? A grandmother, a grandfather, an aunt, a neighbor, a teacher, a stranger, someone who waited for you, or prayed for you, or thought about you from a distance you could not see across. Tell me their name. Let us honor them together, all of us here, in this small place on the internet, which is not so different from a small church in a small town in Tennessee on the second Sunday of May. Because love never really dies, friends. It just waits. It waits on a porch. It waits in a letter. It waits in the blue paint on a door. It waits, and it waits, and it waits. Until at last, you come walking up the path. And then it says, very quietly, welcome home. Hit the like button if you believe. I'll see you in the next story.